Good evening and welcome to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gary Morgan. With me, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Jim Stamm. How you doing, brother?
Doing all right, man. Make sure those cell phones are away. I don't want to find anybody. I don't want to have to deal with another controversy, so we'll put those to the side.
What a controversy it was, too. A hilarious controversy in which 2 days later now, people that were okay with it a couple days ago are fired up. I love it. I love nothing more than when the flyby media stops in and, you know, the ones that never cover the Pirates ever unless they do something embarrassing. And then all of a sudden they all come out of the woodwork. They got an opinion on everything, right?
Yeah, it's funny how that works here. They don't exist until it benefits them for it to exist, and then they're all over it.
It's crazy. But I think, Jim, we kind of started talking about something, and I'm going to also welcome to the show James Littleton, who finally was able to get on. He had a computer difficulty that he overcame. And Jim, all you missed was or James. I always do that when you guys are on together, James and Jim. It bothers the hell out.
We'll figure it out.
I'll call him West Virginia man. Look at him.
I'll call him John Denver right now.
Anyway, James Littleton is with us too. And that's good because what we're going to talk about first is spending in the new year. You know, in 2023, you often hear people, they like to deliver those ultimatums, Jim. You love those ultimatums they come out with. If they don't spend at least this much, I'm out. It's over for me. If Nutting doesn't spend $70 million in 2023, then they never cared from the start. I mean, what do you really expect them to spend next year? Where? You know what I mean? Like, what are our realistic expectations? We don't know what Bob Nutting's plans are. All we have is history, and he has not spent. You know? We've seen this team spend up to the 100 teens. Okay? Let's count in inflation. By the time this is all maxed out, if he stays as cheap as he is, 130-ish. Right?
That's probably the ceiling.
So next year, what do we want them to spend and where do we want them to spend it? Go ahead, Jim.
All right. Well, you know, there's different elements to this. You're dealing with what you'd like to see them spend, what's going to be available out there on the market. It just this off season as far as free agents go.
Sure.
You know, and so that's a big part of it too. And then the question of, is it time for them to really spend, even if they wanted to, which, as we all know, we'll see. I look at it like this. I think, very simply, I would look at wanting to at least add, at the bare minimum, a reliever with some real pedigree and something offensively to help supplement all these guys we're trying out prospect-wise that we all know aren't going to make it.
So you're going even more vague than I thought you would. You know, by that, I thought you'd actually kind of have some pinpoint positions.
First base, I think I'd love to see something. I just think that I get what they're trying to do with Madris. I like Chavis. But when I start thinking of them in terms of really trying to compete, even if that's in 2 years, what is on the way there?
Right.
You know,
James, I
So
don't want to put words in your mouth, but you've said a lot. You don't care if they spend this year. You kind of don't even want them to. Now, some people will take that as that's a defense mechanism because you don't expect them to spend, so you don't want to get egg on your face, so you're just going to come out and say that's your expectation. I know you well enough to know that's actually what you think. So, do you want them to spend any money? And if so, where?
For next year?
Yeah.
Yes. I wouldn't mind them spending some money. And Jim alluded to first base. Um, what I would like to see them do is go after like Trey Mancini, a right-handed bat with some power to it. I don't think he would cost super too much money. I think they could get him.
I mean, he turned down a pretty hefty option.
I think he's gonna
So,
get a pretty nice deal, James. But I I
I like where your head's at.
I
Though.
love that. I love that name. I think he'd be great in Pittsburgh. I think obviously, but that would be really, really pie in the sky for me.
I I would hope that
Regardless,
they
this
could
is
get him
what
for
we want,
15 a
not what we
year.
think they'll do, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's an important distinction. Want what we'd like them to do, not what we think they'll do.
Right.
Go ahead, James. Sorry.
That's okay.
I love Trey Mancini, by the way. So
uh, Gary, you mentioned, or somebody mentioned a reliever. Was that you, Jim?
yeah,
Obviously, they're not going to go out and get like Edwin Diaz. That's just the name I wrote down was maybe like a Michael Fulmer, somewhere in there. I mean, he's
Yeah.
something like that. And then they're not going to spend a whole lot. I mean, some of the payroll is going to go up just because a bunch of guys are hitting arbitration, so that's going to increase some. But I thought they got to get a catcher somewhere. I would prefer they not do.
Yeah, I think that's the
Perez
thing.
again.
All these positions, they're going to revolve around catcher, first base, reliever. They're going to have to get a starter. So to me, they already have like a 4 deep shopping list that I don't even know that I consider optional.
I know a lot of people. Well, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but some people on Twitter keep saying they need to spend $20 million on a starter, and I mean that's just, I don't see it. I mean, I can see starters out there that they would want, but I just don't think they'll pay for them.
But yeah, that's really what
them to do it, but I just don't see it. Yeah,
I know, like as we sit here and we talk about want, but I think that that's so unrealistic that I've kind of pushed it off to the side, even though I think they clearly could use it, need it. But yeah, like if you could, and I stayed away from catcher a little bit because I know we're going to jump into that a little bit anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, catcher's just so obvious at this point that they've got to do something. But if there's a guy out there and you can jump on him a year early and you're going to try to sign someone to a 3 or 4 year deal or a 5 year deal, well, that's still going to fit plenty in a window, and it will really help in the part of maybe trying to expedite things a little bit. I just think we're at that point where we need to do that somewhat. I just don't want to sit back and wait and wait and wait.
If you're going to sign somebody for some money,
here.
Okay, sorry.
Let's take a quick break here. We'll come back. We're going to pick up a little bit more of this conversation because I don't think I really gave too many of my thoughts.
Yeah, we just rambled here.
And there's a couple things about this that I really want to touch on. So. We're back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. We're going to pick up our conversation talking a little bit more about whether the Pirates need to spend some money. And I started out saying I thought there was 4 positions they kind of have no choice but to do something about. Reliever, I think they need a lefty reliever specifically. They need a starter. Yep. I'd prefer it to be a lefty. I'm not sure they'll be available on the market. They need a catcher. A starter. I think they probably already have their sights set on Roberto Perez for that. I'd prefer they upgrade that and go get a Tucker Barnhart or Omar Narvaez, somebody like that, who I think they could probably afford to grab for a couple of years. But there's a lot of places they can spend money. There's some places they really shouldn't spend money. Like I don't want to see them go out and get a middle infielder. Like, for real, you know what I mean? I don't want to see them go out and get a third baseman. I don't want to see them go out and get an outfielder at all. Because I'd rather use my internal options at outfield right now. I at least need to filter through them. And that's going to take next year. We haven't even seen Travis Swaggerty do anything yet. You know he's getting a shot. So how do you justify spending in certain areas? Like, I can tell you, if I spend $5-6 million on an outfielder, I can make this team better next year. But I also might not get to see enough of Jack Sawinski or enough of Travis Swaggerty or any of Kanan Smith and Jigba. Or what about Matt Gorski and Matt Frazier and Cal Mitchell? We're already running out of room for these guys. How do you justify those two things? James, I'll start with you because I think this is where you're going when you talk about not wanting to spend a lot of money next year.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to sort through a lot of players. If they were going to sign an outfielder, which, like you said, I don't think they should, I would prefer it to be Gamble as a fourth outfielder. But like you said, they've got a ton of outfielders to sort through. I don't even think you mentioned Bay, who can play center.
I didn't. No, you're right.
So I mean, they've got a lot to sort through, and it's going to take.
Yeah, that's with me not even counting Marcano as an outfielder, and I kind of maybe should.
Yeah, I think that's going to be his best chance to get the most playing time. But they're going to have to use the rest of this season. They've got the rest of August, all of September, and for me, use next season to sort through who they really want to move forward with and who they're going to use as trading chips either this offseason or next offseason to plug holes.
Right.
Because they've got to.
So, Jim, when I suggest positions, though, like if I say I want to get a starter, I say that because I don't see anything that they'd be holding up right now. You know, like, yeah, I want to see more Michael Burrows. Yeah, I want to see Cody Bolton.
Okay, starting pitcher, you mean? Okay.
Yeah, but if you go out and spend on a starting pitcher, you're not hurting anybody's progress. All you're doing is pushing somebody to the bullpen or out of the rotation that got beaten out. That's all. That's what you're supposed to want to do, right?
No, I would hope that they would be at least open to it. I don't think they're going to go the big, huge route like James was talking about, also saying that they weren't going to do that. They're just not going to go out and sign some like top end guy. But if you can find someone that you think is a really good value and a really good middle of the rotation guy, I mean, I would do it. Here's the other part of all this is like it, and I mentioned this in the first segment. It's like at some point you got to start trying to actually compete before. I mean, every year you do this, you're wasting a year. You're wasting a year of Hayes. You're wasting a year of Reynolds. Okay, now we're getting the bullpen figured out. If you're not ready next year, well, then all of a sudden, does that carry over to the next season if you think Holderman and Yeri and Bednar are legit and that, but how long does that last? And so
you're kind of saying exactly what I said, right? There has to come a point where you spend, and you should want to improve your team tangibly to win this year. How do you balance that thought with the very real need to work through these prospects is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
It's a hard question to answer. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then on top of it, you've got a division that probably next year is going to be eminently winnable. so here we are again. It's like I just feel like at some point, the old saying, you know, do your business or get off the pot. I want to start doing that. I just feel like every year is a waste to try to keep the little bit that you have going and got together, to keep it together enough to get to the next year. That's a lifetime in baseball. Like, so,
Right.
like narrow it down to the positions we're talking about. Put your best foot forward. If you still believe in your plan, great. It's there and it's ready for the stuff you say is coming anyway.
Yeah, and you can
That's
always move these guys. But to me, I guess, James, where I'll go with it next is the time to do that. If you were going to do this, let's make it fun for the fans. Let's actually try to win. Let's build a winning culture. That's, to me, something that should have happened in 2021. They should have gone out and bought some free agents, not unlike the Reds just did. And they slowly were quietly rebuilding their system in the background while they had all those guys, traded them off, got another glut in, and now I think they're probably pretty close to entering the stage we're just entering next year, where you're loaded with a bunch of kids. You're probably still not going to be good, but you're on the rise. That's how quickly they turned it over because they spent in 2020. You know what
Yes.
I mean?
Yes.
So to me, it's an option to go that route. The Pirates forego that option and just went with a straight tear down rebuild. So here we are, to the point where spending like that, you'd be an idiot because you're wasting everything that you just built
I've
to
got
die on the vine.
Yeah, I've got a really good friend who's a Reds fan, and I can tell you he's not a fan of what they've done. He's a diehard, and I prefer the
I'm just
total.
watching it from afar, man.
Yeah, I'm a fan of what Charrington did with the just the total tear down, go from scratch. You maximize the higher draft pick. Like the Reds, I don't know where they finished last year, but I know I don't remember where they drafted, but I preferred getting the top draft picks. You have more choice, like last year where Charrington got Davis to sign under slot and then stocked up. I prefer that route than buying all these or getting all these big name guys and then having to sell them off. That's just my personal preference. I thought
I
last
get
year
it.
was
I understand.
my friend.
I bring it up in this fashion because, Jim, it's a conversation we've had multiple times. We always like to say this isn't the way it had to be.
Yeah,
They could
yeah.
have done this another way. Well, this is kind of what I'm talking about. I believe they had to move on from that core and and completely tear some things away. But there's no reason they couldn't have gone out in free agency and bought some guys and made it a better team on the way, right? All you're missing is the low draft picks then. You're still getting all these pieces in. You can still trade these people.
yeah, yeah, and that was see, and James is okay with how they're doing it. I've always felt it was conveniently the cheapest way to do it. And when you deal with Bob Nutting and the Pirates, there's that element to it that you just can't, dismiss. And so, yeah, I would have loved to have seen them along the way. Now, if you're going to tell me they're going to spend all this money they've been saving in payroll here, then I'll buy it. But, I
That's the
I've
funny thing,
seen.
man, because the point that I always bring up in this whole thing is never once have I trusted Bob Nutting to spend one dime more than he ever did accounting for inflation. I've
No,
always said that. And the
no,
reason
like,
I've said it is because why would I? I'm not dumb. I'm not, I don't trust him to spend that. Now, I've also believed that Ben Charrington was under the impression that he was going to be able to spend more if he spent less now. That doesn't mean that I have to believe he was told the truth.
I hope they had a really nuanced, detailed conversation about what some of that stuff meant, and to each of them, because if not, uh,
Well, to the point of the whole thing, I think we'll find out when we talk about like that spending glut that we want to see. You guys all want to see Padres-esque spending, and I don't see that ever happening. But
No.
let's say there is some magic coffer being saved, and he's got like an extra 50 mil, so they can kick it up to like 180 or something. Okay, I'll buy it. I'll be like, okay, I see the vision now. I get what you did. But if there is no savings coffer thing, to me, this is just unnecessary suffering for fans.
I,
With a chance at a few high draft picks, but then if you're going to play games and not get the top of talent available, then I don't know.
I have faith in not in Bob Nutting, because I don't. I don't think anybody does. But I do believe that Charrington wouldn't have come here without some assurances. And I have faith in that. Obviously, Nutting can go back on that. He's the owner. And I mean, I just don't think BC would have come here and said, hey, I want to do a total teardown, rebuild. But when we're ready to compete, we're going to need some money. And I just don't think he would have done it unless he had some assurances. I think he would have been a little bit more in demand than that.
The alternative is that he is such a masochist that he wanted to take a job and prove to baseball that he could tear down something and create a system in his own vision and win the damn World Series with the cheapest owner in the game. And I just, it's hard for me to fathom that anybody would go into a job thinking that's the way they're going to go about it. I know everybody thinks they're better at stuff than other people, but like, come on now. Like, there had to have been some kind of a handshake and a smile. That's why I can completely believe he thinks that's happening. I can completely believe that I need to see it. But I don't think I'm going to find that out this offseason one way or the other. You get what I mean?
I mean, if they could sign somebody, and when I say I don't care if they spend, I don't. But if they do spend, I'm okay with it as long as they're signing somebody, for me, to a 4-year deal to get them at least through 26, when I think they will be really competitive in 25, 26. So as long as you cover that time frame, I'm fine with them spending now. It just, to me, it's not, if it doesn't happen, I'm okay. Now, next season is a whole different story after 23. But for me, right now, if they sign somebody, great. Just 4-year deal.
Yeah, and see that's where it's like, you think about it in terms of just logically taking, just thinking about in terms of baseball. You're like, we're talking about a team that hasn't even extended Brian Reynolds yet. We got to get that. They got to get that done. And then, so now we're talking about like, yeah, I'd love to go out and get Trey Mancini and sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal. And I think it would take at least that much to get it done. But now we're talking about this team carrying Brian Hayes' contract, Brian Reynolds' contract. You're going to go out and carry Trey Mancini's contract for a team that I just don't know. I just find it hard to believe that they're going to do those things. I really do. I don't know, guys. What do you, I mean? Do you when you start listing it like that, is that something that you can buy?
I mean, I can. I think Liriano was a pretty big contract for a free agent lefty.
He was what, 339, 3 for 39.
But they didn't even pay it all.
No, they sold it off.
They didn't pay it all because he fell off a cliff and they couldn't hang a pitcher that couldn't throw anymore.
Well, they sent
Right,
him.
but what I'm saying is like, so now all of a sudden we're going from that kind of situation to them carrying 3 or 4 of those guys. Man,
I mean, it's been a
it's
decade.
a big.
It's like,
Well, yeah, it's been a decade, but I mean that's sad in a way too, though. Like, so I just, it's such a leap for me to think that we're going to be in that territory with Bob Nutting. I hope I'm entirely wrong.
I mean, I look at contracts that were carried like Polanco and Marte and McCutchen, and they were paying Walker some money there towards the end. And AJ Burnett wasn't cheap and Liriano wasn't cheap. We saw the payroll go up. I think that's what we'll see.
I
And I
really
think
like
that includes a free agent here and there
I really like how
in that
they
reasonable range.
structured Hayes' contract. They sort of or front loaded it a little bit. So because it goes
Yeah, he's got
down,
$10 million this year right
and
away.
I think it's 10 next year, and then it goes down to like
Yeah.
8 or something like that. So I mean,
there were some people trying to parse it into seeing the window visually in his contract. The low years or when Charrington thinks he'll be competing. It is interesting the way they
It's
did
a
it
good.
because
It
it
is.
peaks back at the end.
It's a very good point, James, to bring up that depending on how you want to how you want to look at that is maybe they've given themselves some flexibility there. But like overall, and I don't want to be too pessimistic here. Let's like get that Reynolds deal done, at least get that done, and so then maybe we can start talking about how do we bridge this and maybe speed it up a little bit next year. That's what I would like them to do. Until it happens, it's just so hard to really count on it.
I'm confused now. Are you talking about you don't think they'll do it this off season, or are you saying you don't think they'll ever do it? Because I was taking it as ever when I was talking before, not this off season.
Yeah, I think I question both. I really do.
Yeah, see, ever I don't question as much because I've seen them do it. I think they'll do it again. But do I think that we're to a point where they're going to completely change the philosophy? No. And I'll be honest, I don't think that they have the administrators that know how to do that. I really don't. I don't think they have the type of team that knows how to bring in a free agent and not screw them up.
That's a big concern, and I'll tell you what, though, they talked a lot about this whole thing about what they learned from this last time of getting close, what Bob Nutting learned. Well,
this leads right into call your shot.
you got to be able. I mean, let's see how much, because they got close, and I don't think that I think they just were scared to really go for it a little bit, and we'll see if they really have learned from that.
Yeah, I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because I don't think that any fans, including you, apparently, remember exactly what happened at the end of that season that tore that team apart. So there was an awful lot of uncontrollables in that box.
Which team, though? We're talking about the whole time through it, though. Or at least I am.
If the window was supposed to stick till 16, they needed some things to go their way. And they didn't. I mean, AJ retiring was a dagger. And a guy that we had for all of 2 months, we cry about like we had him for 10 years and let him slip through our fingers, and Jay Happ. For 2 months. He was a free agent. He signed a place that was going to pay him way more than the Pirates were ever going to offer him.
Sure.
Liriano fell off the face of the earth, never to be found again until he resurrected his career as a reliever for the Pirates years and years later. There was just an awful lot of bad that happened there. And Andrew McCutchen had the worst season of his career in 2016. It was god-awful.
Yeah.
Starling Marte got pinged for PED. Things just fell apart on them, too, on top of being cheap.
Sure. That's just it, is like...
In other words, I don't think $15 million more than was going to save that, is my point. All right, Jim, so I understand. I'm talking about ever. You're kind of talking about both, ever and right now. So I get where you're coming from. I just think that we've seen them do it in the past. We'll see them do it to a certain degree again. 2023, to me, I feel like we just have too many prospects to go through to be investing big dollars anywhere outside of some place where I don't think will be populated soon, like first base or catcher.
Yeah, I mean, probably the only other distinction I would make is back then is we were kind of doing it, making those extensions and stuff with our homegrown guys, and so like aside from doing something really early with Cruz, that's not really part of this equation, right? We've got Hayes locked up. Um, so that would be the only small distinction. I feel like if we can just target, hey, I would take this offseason, I would take go out. Let's fortify that bullpen some more. Get that lefty. And if that doesn't work out, then go get a right-hander one and let's shorten these games. And
I wish I trusted their free agent um, acquisitions fully. They've had some good success, like Tyler Anderson was really good. Quintana really turned out well. Heath Hembry was total stinker.
it
Like, and
was.
I'm just saying, like they have taken some swings.
Mm-hmm.
They've just had some misses too, you know. And like watching Greg Allen, like this last couple weeks, man, it would have been nice if he had been around all year. It would have been really cool to have an answer about him going into 3 more years of arbitration, because we talk about maybe like go out and get a Gamble for a couple of years. Well, isn't that kind of what Allen is? Only a switch hitter, maybe a little more upside, really.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Gamble. Yeah, I'm partial to the guy. I like how he plays. I think he's very Pittsburgh, whether he knows it or not. But
No, he is. He's great.
yeah, Gamble has a little bit more pop, I think, obviously, and then they just flashed, how good he's been with runners in scoring position all year. I mean, like really, really good. And so, whether that carries over to another year, sometimes that's hard to count on. But for a team that's lacking a veteran and struggles to score runs a little bit, yeah, I'm partial to him around, but I get what you're saying, Gary. It would have been nice to at least have seen from the beginning.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, guys. Let's take a quick break. Let's come back. Let's do call your shot, because I think it's going to lead us into another pretty interesting conversation. And I got to get to Billy Joel, so we got to hurry up. All right, and we're back to the Pirates Fan Forum here at DK Pittsburgh Sports. Jim Stamm, James Littleton, spirited conversation we just had about
Billy
spending money.
Joel.
Yeah, spending money always keeps us really, melancholy and quiet. We never get passionate about that at all. But let's do call your shot. Go ahead, boys. Play the intro. All right, call your shot this week is from the Pirate Queen Banshee. And she says the lack of foresight into building a reliable catching position has been disastrous. Do you think the Pirates learned anything from this seemingly impulsive trade? And can this be noticeably detrimental to the start of next season? She's obviously talking about the Jacob Stallings trade. I don't want to try to guess what she means entirely, but to me, I take it as trading Jacob Stallings when you didn't have another catcher ready might not have been the smartest thing in the world. And James, I'll let you have a crack at it, but I'm gonna tee you up a little bit.
Okay, thanks.
Trading Quintana without having another starter in the pipe ready that you were willing to use is along the same kind of lines, right?
Yeah, it's similar. I don't have a problem with the Stallings trade. They tried to address it. They thought they had it addressed, even though I didn't like the signing, and you're well aware of that I wasn't a fan of the whole Perez $5 million for a guy coming off shoulder surgery. I just didn't think it would work. I thought he'd get hurt again. and he got hurt again. Not the shoulder, but I mean, so I think they'll.
He's made a lot of us prognosticators look smart. I get it.
Yeah, I think they'll try to do the same thing again this offseason. I do think they will maybe bring back Stallings when he gets non-tendered in Miami. They're familiar with
Oh
him.
wow!
I'm calling that now.
Wow.
James Bomb incoming.
I'm calling that now. He's going to get non-tendered. They're familiar with him. The pitching staff likes him. I think they'll bring him back. I
didn't even consider that, James. That's
Dude, you just blew my mind. You just blew my. See, this is why we have people on, because we're not smart enough to think of that stuff.
I mean, he's been horrible this year. He's going to get non-tendered.
Yes. Yeah.
We already discussed the Quintana trade, and I personally hadn't considered really the stupidity of not having another starter in the pipeline, to the point where we're stretching out Tyler Beatty on the fly. What do you think? Do you think they'll learn from that, or do you think that they just considered the catching position the price of doing business and they got what they wanted?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is whether they've learned from it or not, they're just in a tough spot now because you're scrambling to still try to figure that out. Perez is an unknown. Maybe Stallings comes back in the picture, which, by the way, I don't mind. I don't mind that actually at all. Or maybe, God, I wish they could just do both of them. But wouldn't that be something after all this if they ended up with both of them next year? But hey, you want to talk about being able to try to handle some of these pitchers, and it's important to have catchers that can do it. How many are we on now? 8, 7?
Feels that way.
At some point, you can't talk about how important it is to have good catching behind guys and helping develop a staff, and then you're doing this stuff. And then to further complicate all this is now Henry Davis with him getting hurt and, pushing things back. And, he's got some – this has really, really pushed him back, I think. We at one point, or at least I was at one point, hopeful that he was going to be healthy enough and push things enough to maybe you start seeing him next year or even have a shot out of spring training.
I mean, on the other hand, Endy might be flying right past him.
Yeah, true. Very, very true. But next year, I think they're in kind of a similar situation. I
totally
don't
agree.
So whether you've learned from it or not, I'm not sure what you can do about it. You've already made that decision.
When the trade happened, when they traded Stallings, I remember you and I had the show. We talked about it. We were both a little dumbfounded by it. Both liked the return.
Mm-hmm.
But we both felt, okay, but you've screwed the catching position now for 2 years.
That you claimed is very important.
Yeah, and I guess, to me, you got to give to get. I get that. Thompson has certainly given them enough this year, innings-wise, and he's done okay. I like Kyle Nicholas. I like Scott. Yeah. They could all be great players here. Who knows? But, man, you really kind of made things a lot more difficult than they needed to be at a position, one of the few, mind you, that was sewn up.
It sounds to me like they almost got things happened very fast on that front, and they felt it was too good to pass up, and they were just going to worry about it later, and they wanted to add the pitching. They needed, which anybody that's listened to this show for these last, as long as we've been on, we've talked about the pitching and how they did need to catch it up. So it probably shouldn't surprise us that they jumped on it. But yeah, it's left them in a real bind, And
so to answer the question and really kind of wrap things up here tonight, I don't know that we can say that they're going to learn from it, because I think they're probably happy with the results and feel like they had some bad luck. And I could say it's kind of hard for you to blame bad luck when it was so eminently predictable how it would turn out. But okay, I can believe that you thought he'd be healthy. I guess my point all along was if you trade somebody that has been that sure for you, you better make sure you're still sure. So you get somebody that's injury prone, get a good backup. And they didn't. So,
Yeah, and just to add one more thing there is like whatever they're going to have to do there, they're going to try to do it short-term fix. They or whether it's a Henry Davis situation or an Endy Rodriguez situation that's what they want. So we're again kind of in that same boat, right? Where we're trying to patch it however it happens.
I mean, I will say they got 3 coming if you count Abraham Gutierrez too. And, according to Craig from talking to some of the pitchers, they like throwing to him the best. So, we may end up with a defensive catcher and a DH and a second baseman out of those 3 for all we know. So, what's important is do the bats play and when they actually get here. I think tail end of 2023, you can start thinking about 1 or 2 of those being realistic as far as getting a cup of coffee, at least.
Yeah. So, and then we're talking about the robot umps, and if they try to do anything with that changes things considerably too.
Right, and that's the point. You're not going to go out and sign a guy for 3-4 years right now to hold down your catcher position because why would you?
Right.
Yeah. And it circles all the way back to the original conversation, which is how do you spend money and where do you spend money? Because catcher is an obvious hole, but you can't spend too much, can you? And you really can't go get that stud because you got studs coming. You have to wait for them or none of this works.
It's actually a position where they are in pretty good shape down the road, or it appears that they are. So it would be the one you would least like to commit anything to it, right?
Right. But hey, that's got to be it for this week because I've got a whole bunch of songs to sing along to and some beers to drink tonight, and I'm really excited. And going to Billy Joel at PNC tonight, total surprise, and I'm really pumped. So, James, how do people get a hold of you, brother? And thank you for making it. I know it was difficult.
Yeah, thanks for letting me in
today.
Jay Littleton 42 at Twitter and on Facebook, James Littleton. I'm in all the Pirates groups, spreading my gloom and doom.
Thanks, brother. Jim, how do people get a hold of you, brother?
So it's all Pittsburgh all the time. It's for the city _412 or at Jim Stamm 22. We're not going to have James on probably, before the backyard brawl. So I'm going to put him on the spot right now, and I want a prediction. I want that Pitt, West Virginia backyard brawl prediction right now, dude.
31-20 Pitt.
All right, you heard it right here. He's a realist.
I have no faith in Neil Brown.
James.
Well, you know what? It's going to be an awesome game, awesome time. So we'll see how it goes. Rivalries are weird.
And speaking of backyard brawl, I should probably mention I got a new podcast going on here on the site. It comes up every Sunday afternoon. It is the Reborn H2P podcast on DK Pittsburgh Sports. And it's with my new friend, Corey Crisson. He is the beat writer for Pitt Athletics over at DK Pittsburgh Sports. And we're going to be bringing that to you every week through training camp. We just got started with the first episode last week. Plan to do it all season long. And yes, we're going to talk basketball too. We're going to talk as many sports as we can pretend we know about. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So join us if you can. Until next week, hey Ben, take it away.
Yes, go Bucks!